Hey, nice to see you all. I'm Tom Gedeon. I'm a professor of AI at Curtin University. The kinds of things I'm interested in are responsive AI, which is what I'm mostly going to be talking about today, with hopefully a few jokes thrown in. I'm going to very briefly mention responsible AI, and I'm not going to talk about all the other things I do at all. But what we really want to do with all of this is understand people better and to create computer systems, robots probably, whether they're virtual and show up on a screen or whether they're a physical robot, which responds to people in a way that we as human beings can respond to each other. Any of you have used ChatGPT? Do you remember there used to be the button which says stop generating? Yeah? People don't need a stop generating button. We can tell by people's body language when, we're going off on the wrong tangent. Yeah? Happens a lot to me, but I've learned. But I've mostly learned to recognize the signals when I'm answering a completely wrong question. So I'm very much into sensors, mostly wearables, though we do use some cameras. Now, I want to talk a little bit about emotions. Yeah, we can use wearables and other sensors to predict when you're happy or sad or why did I come into this room anyway? I'm sure you've all had the experience where you go to the kitchen for something and you go, why did I come here? Right? And then you go back to where you came from and you go, oh, that's it. Yeah? Turns out there's a neurological basis for this. I'm a little bit interested, obviously, in the way the brain works. And it turns out we have place cells in our brains. And the problem is we've gone into the other room and we've left the information sort of mentally behind. So in a lot of ways, things like virtual reality are actually quite a lot more similar to the way our brains work than we might think. So I'm going to talk about robots and making them more responsive, but there is a bit of a niggling concern. I worry about the day when they start asking for healthcare benefits or paid holidays. But before I talk about too much more, I'd like to tell you a little bit about my background, which will give you an understanding of why I'm into this. So, a bit of a patchwork background. I was born behind the Iron Curtain. Yes, I was born somewhere there was iron in the name, and now I'm somewhere where there's curtain in the name. Just don't tell my boss that I made that joke. I feel a little bit that I've come full circle. Certainly the weather here is nicer, well, except when it's 41 degrees. But, yeah. And of course we're doing hot research, right? So, but between Central Europe and Australia, I actually grew up in the Caribbean. Sadly, that's me. If you can imagine growing up in a place where everybody can dance, and dance well, and play music, and I have 2 left feet, and sometimes and I don't have much musical talent. In my family, I'm the designated audience. So we moved a lot when I was a kid, which got me very much into reading and particularly science fiction, which is what I think got me into AI and robots. Well, that and the fact that, the kind of robots that I was reading about sounded much more easy to understand than other human beings. Well, And also, given I was born in the Eastern Bloc, so behind the Iron Curtain, in that sort of planned socialist economy, I think emotions were considered a luxury, and was centrally allocated. And I think mine got lost in the mail, or at least for a while. Well, I'm not sure, but they might have arrived while I was at university. Or maybe it was just I discovered girls and learnt that you had to pretend to have emotions. Or maybe I was just a nerd. Yes. So, these days, I do experiments, and Frankenstein really resonated with me. Yeah? He had some problems with his creations too. Luckily, my sense of humour did arrive, which helped a lot, because of course we use a lot of students as experimental subjects. They are always happy to volunteer. But let's talk a bit more about what kind of things can we use these wearables for. I've mentioned emotions, but they can also measure things like steps, your heart rate, and those awkward moments when you pretend to recognize somebody and not actually. Conferences, you often meet people and you go, I know this guy, or sometimes you go, oh, we've met, and then you realize halfway through, no, you haven't. Luckily, people wear name badges, and usually it has the university they're on. So you go, oh, where are you now? While you're quickly reading their name. So, all of this sort of stuff I'm talking about, with sensors and getting reactions, is all what I would call responsive AI, yeah? Making AI responsive to the human. But if we collect a lot of data like that, we're starting to risk breaching people's privacy. And that's what so responsible AI, I use that term for privacy preserving AI. We're working on deep fake techniques to replace people's faces, for example, in videos, so that their privacy is protected. If we do that, then everybody will be just as bad at recognizing faces, and their privacy will be protected. So hey, instead of improving my own skills, I'll bring everybody to the same level. So, I've mentioned wearables which are sensors, but we've also got a very interesting one, which will zap you. Okay? If you do something wrong. So far it's been a little bit harder to get experimental subjects for this one, as you can imagine. One guy, though, really enjoyed being zapped. Unfortunately, the ethics committee told us that we shouldn't use this data. It turns out that masochism isn't good science. So, anybody here happy to have a zap for science? Hands up? Oh, can't see any. I'll ask again. Okay, so I've talked about wanting to have computer systems or robots which are responsive. Well, what could be wrong with this? Make me a sandwich. Well, it could be taken a little bit too literally. I was originally going to go with, can you give me a hand, please? But robot rips off his. I thought, no, this is a little bit better. No. So what we want is the robots, AI powered, of course, to interpret context better. Now this would be much better, don't you think? Of course, you have to be, the devil is always in the detail. We don't want this. Now, when we're talking about wearables and how we want computer systems and robots to be more responsive, an inspiration for me was my wife's fur baby, Kimmy. Dogs are really, really good at reading body language, but they're not so good with words. Whereas things like ChatGPT are good with words, but not so good with body language. So maybe what I need is some kind of robot canine. Yeah? Now, but who would make one of these things? Okay, glad a few people got that. But maybe we could doctor this robot a little bit and add some hands. So maybe what we need is a robot dog butler. And the advantage is that perhaps we could make things which only a dog level AI. It doesn't have to be human. You know, all this stuff about artificial general intelligence, making AIs as smart as humans. We don't need that. They won't have holidays then. We just want them to be probably a ChatGPT enabled dog. Alright, so what else could we use these things for? Well, I mentioned sort of some of my deficits in recognizing faces, emotion things. We could miniaturize this, put things in a smartwatch. And the thing that occurred to me most would be a sarcasm detector. If I'm in a meeting and somebody says something, I'm going, did they mean that? Did they mean that literally? Is this an illusion? Is this sarcasm? You know, I just look at my watch and it says, yeah, 89% sarcasm. And what I'd really like is a button which would then sync with ChatGPT and give me a response. Don't you think that's such a fantastic response? No. Yeah. Needs a little bit of work. So, what's the takeaways from all of this? AIs and robots are more than just machines. They're tools to understand and enhance our humanity. They should serve us willingly. So that's why we don't want artificial general intelligence. We want artificial general stupidity or something. Yeah? We want them to be smart enough to do the things safely, reliably, without hallucinations, and not get bored. Yeah? And maybe they could even help us figure out why we walked into the room. Now, my emotional allocation has finally definitely arrived with the help of AI. Thanks for sharing this journey with me, this talk. I want to close by asking, surely somebody would like to use that? It's for science.